proclaiming the fullness of truth with clarity and charity.
Heard around the world on your Android and Apple mobile devices.
The Simple Truth, rising up to explore the difficult topics of real life. Join us as we proclaim the good, the true, and the beautiful with the simple truth of Jesus Christ and His Holy Catholic Church through Scripture, tradition, and the Catechism. And now, your host, Jim Havens.
Happy Easter, hallelujah. Great to be back with you on The Simple Truth, where we proclaim the life-giving reality of Jesus and His Catholic Church. We consecrate everything to the Sacred Heart of Jesus through the Immaculate Heart of Mary and the pure, strong heart of St. Joseph. It is Throwdown Thursday, where we focus on themes of spiritual warfare and the real challenges that are before us, all to better understand the battles we're in, to actively, effectively engage in fighting the good fight, to participate with the grace of God that is being lavished upon us, and share in the victory of Christ now and for all eternity. Our guest today, Dr. Jennifer Roback Morse, president of the Ruth Institute and author of The Sexual State, How Elite Ideologies Are Destroying Lives. And our topic today comes from part 4 in that book, The Gender Ideology. You can find out more about Dr. Morse as well as her book and all of her great work at ruthinstitute.org. Dr. Morse, thank you so much for being with us today.
I'm glad to be here with you, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Terrific. Well, let's begin with a little something from St. Augustine and the Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 2482, which both define a lie as, quote, speaking a falsehood with the intention of deceiving. The Lord Jesus also denounces lying as the work of the devil, quote, you are of your father, the devil. There is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks according to his own nature, for he is a liar and the father of lies, the Gospel of John chapter 8, verse 44. So when we're talking about lies, we are most certainly in the realm of spiritual warfare. And when we're talking about lies that are engineered to deceive people at a fundamental level about what it means to be human, we're talking about extremely dangerous lies from the pit of hell. Our purpose here on Throwdown Thursday is to expose such lies, proclaim the truth that sets us free. We have the truth. It needs to be lived and proclaimed. So, case in point, CNN recently reported that biological sex is a disputed term and that, quote, there is no consensus criteria for assigning sex at birth. After some backlash, CNN updated their story to, quote, provide additional explanation as to the distinctions between gender and sex. And their story now states that, quote, it is not possible to know a person's gender identity at birth. And for some people, the sex listed on their original birth certificate is a misleading way of describing the body they have, end of quote. So Dr. Morse, help CNN out here and anyone else who's drinking this insanity Kool-Aid. What is the difference between these terms, sex and gender?
All righty. Well, I'll tell you something. It's hard to tell the players without a scorecard in this area because the terms themselves were created for ideological purposes. So people need to understand these are ideological terms, first of all. And it's made doubly difficult by the fact that people don't always use them correctly, even in their ideological sense. So it's layers of confusion. And I believe that CNN was partly confused, but I also believe that the people who are generating the gender ideology are deliberately creating confusion, so, which would count as a lie, so there, in your definition there of a lie, there's a difference between a lie and a confusion or a person who's being misled or, so on and so forth. But anyway, CNN really should have known better for what they said. So the term sex is supposed to refer exclusively to the body, the biological difference between male and female. That's your sex. Jim, your sex is male. Jennifer, my sex is female, okay? But gender is supposed to refer to everything that has to do with gender roles, your sense of yourself as male or female, masculine or feminine, your way of perceiving yourself, your way of behaving, the roles that you take on, and so on and so forth. So The gender theorists, you could say, the sexual revolutionaries, they invented this distinction between sex and gender because what they wanted to do was to undermine sex roles. They wanted to say that there's something fundamentally wrong with saying girls should be mommies and boys should be daddies. Girls should stay home, boys should go to work. We don't like any of this. So they created something to undermine the stability of gender roles. Mm-hmm. And that was the original purpose of it. And it's taken on a much bigger and deeper significance than that, as you can see from the quote that you read. But that's, if you're going to use these terms correctly, that's what you're supposed to be talking about.
Okay, so sex here referring to science, referring to biology, right? And then gender here is more of like some sort of a philosophical term. Would that be an accurate way to look at the distinction?
Well, in a way, I don't think it's a philosophical term. I think it's an ideological term. It's meant to, which is different because a philosophical term is aiming for precision, and an ideological term is aiming for manipulation. Kind of psychic manipulation. And so, but in any case, whatever description you want to put on it, the term gender. The usefulness of that term and that distinction, Jim, is that gender is something that is socially constructed. Therefore, it can be reconstructed, which was, of course, the objective all along, was to reconstruct those gender roles. And they didn't want to say, gee, we don't realize that men and women are actually different. We just want to say that everything you see that seems like it's male and female, 90% of it is socially constructed and probably unjust, and we have an obligation to wipe it out. That's what they were trying to do. That's what they were trying to say. So now, fast forward a generation or two, right? So that I would say early feminism was like that. 1960s style feminism, that type of gender theory was part of it, to say that sex and gender are different. Yes, there's men and women, but you don't have to do male and female things. All of that's up for grabs, because what they were trying to do was to reconstruct the social understanding of what it means to be a man or a woman, right? And so you really should be able to understand then that sex absolutely can be determined at birth. Sex is absolutely an objective characteristic. So for CNN to say what they first said was completely incorrect, right? I mean, there's no dispute. You can tell whether a person's a male or a female. End of story, And the statistically insignificant number of people who have some kind of ambiguity, that is properly understood as a disorder of sexual development. In fact, that's what it's called, DSD, disorder of sexual development. And that might be a person with an extra chromosome here or there, or some malformed genitalia, or different kinds of issues like that. Generally speaking, those people are sterile. Those people, whatever that underlying physiological condition is, they're not a third sex. They don't undermine the gender binary or the sex binary, which is a terminology you'll sometimes hear people use. Instead, what is happening there is they're the equivalent of a blind person, okay? So some people are born blind, some people have injuries to their eyes. That doesn't prove that we can't figure out what eyes are for or what eyes are, right? Eyes are for seeing, and some people have eyes that don't work very well. Okay, that's great. We deal with that, right? And so some people have various kinds of disorders of their body so that their sexual parts don't work very well and are unusual, right? But those are medical conditions, and those too, Jim, are objective. Those can be diagnosed. That's part of the body. That can be diagnosed. They don't disprove that there are only two sexes, right? And so it's this term gender that comes in that is really allowing people to say, well, I'm a very masculine woman, and so therefore I'm something other than a woman, or something. It's the gender roles that are really at stake in that term, and sense of self, and how you identify yourself and things like that. That's what the term gender is supposed to encompass. And of course, there can be all kinds of variation in how you see yourself, right? So there are lots of ways to be a man. There are lots of ways to be a woman. And that's what gender-confused children really need to say, so or need to hear. So if anybody is listening to the program and you have a child in your life who has some confusion about their gender identity, this is something that you need to say to them. You need to say two things. You need to say, no one is born in the wrong body. You were not born in the wrong body. And you need to say, there are lots of ways to be a boy. There are lots of ways to be a girl. Just because you don't like the toys that other kids like doesn't mean that you are the wrong sex or that there's something wrong with your body. There are lots of fine ways to be a little girl, lots of fine ways to be a little boy. That's what the kids need to hear. They don't need to be pumped full of, oh, you can pick whether you're going to grow up to be a man or grow up to be a woman. You can choose that. They do not need to be hearing that.
Mm-hmm. Very, very, very important message to share. And I know we only have a couple minutes before the break, but just to really drive this home for parents, which is the common message they're going to be getting in public school, for instance?
Oh my golly! In public schools in most jurisdictions nowadays, or many jurisdictions, I don't know how prevalent it is, but in many jurisdictions, let's put it this way: the space in the curriculum that is called sexual education, that has expanded to include lessons on gender identity. So little children are being told, you can grow up to be a man, even though you seem to be a little girl right now. You won't necessarily grow up to be a woman. It's up to you.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, this is a very, very, very important topic. Guys, I don't know how to stress this anymore. It seems something that should be very fundamental, something that should be very common sense, and yet it is so under attack. Such confusion is being spread that we need to be talking about this and understanding it from the inside out, and we are very blessed to have Dr. Morse here with us to help us to understand this with precision today on The Simple Truth. We'll be right back at it as soon as we come back. Stay tuned.
Prayer in time of affliction. Blessed, O Lord, be thy name forever. Who has permitted this affliction to come upon us? We cannot escape it, but must of necessity fly to thee to help us and turn it to our good. Lord, we are now in affliction. Our souls are ill at ease, for we are much troubled with this present suffering. Let it please thee, O Lord, to deliver us, for poor wretches that we are. What can we do without thee? Thy mighty hand can do all things. Give us patience, O Lord, and strength and peace. Help us, O God, and we will not fear, no matter how grievously we may be afflicted. O Lord, thy will be done. Welcome be the will of God. Sacred Heart of Jesus, we place our trust in thee. Amen.
We offer several ways to view our programming grid, including at our website, thestationofthecross.com, and on our iCatholic Radio app. Just click the menu icon in the top left portion of our app and select the link to our programming grid. That's at thestationofthecross.com and on our free iCatholic Radio app for Android and Apple mobile devices.
Do you love listening to the Station of the Cross on your car radio, but sometimes find yourself driving outside the listening area? Never miss another minute of your favorite show. Download the iCatholic Radio app so you can listen anywhere in the world 24 hours a day. The iCatholic Radio app is available for your phone in the Apple Store or for your Android phone in Google Play. Visit thestationofthecross.com for more information.
The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with our guest today, Dr. Jennifer Roback Morse, president of the Ruth Institute and author of The Sexual State, How Elite Ideologies Are Destroying Lives. You can learn more at ruthinstitute.org. sanctioned.org. We are talking today about the gender ideology, and where we left off before the break, talking about how this is being pushed through the public schools, through the education going on in the public schools, and really even the cultural aspects of what's taking place within the public schools. I guess let me ask you about that, Dr. Morse. This all sort of came onto my radar as something that was really being pushed as far as the transgenderism ideology. When under the Obama administration, all of a sudden, we just started seeing, we were flooded with this news about this whole issue about transgender bathrooms in public schools and all of this. It just seemed like it came out of nowhere from what I was looking at. And all of a sudden it was like, this is the political push from the left. It's all about these bathrooms. And it seemed very strange that all of a sudden this was the big issue that was being pushed. Help us to understand how did that come about that way? And where are we today in terms of that issue, that policy about transgender bathrooms in public schools? Where are we with this?
Well, first off, the bathroom issue is the least of our problems at this point. Right. I mean, it's a problem, but it was the entering wedge. It was the opening salvo in this war. But honestly, I was not completely surprised, Jim, I have to tell you. And as you know from reading my book, The Sexual State, I talk about the gender ideology here. And this poor book, I wrote this book. This book was published in 2018, and it was out of date the minute it was printed because all the crazy stuff just kept multiplying, But the underlying structure that I outline here will be good for a long time and will be good for 100 years, really, to understand what we're dealing with. The gender ideology is really an ideological attack on the human body. These are people who despise the fact that we're male and female and do not listen to anything else that they claim about themselves. The fact that we're male and female, they resent that in one way or another, okay? And so it's actually an alliance of the left and the right, oddly enough. People on the left want everybody to be equal, and I'm going to speak now in broad generalities, okay? People on the left want everybody to be equal, and so men and women can never be completely equal. There is always going to be some differences between men and women, and so the left just gets upset about that, that they can't make all those differences go away and make it all equal. On the right, on the other hand, you have people who want everybody to be, by golly, an individual, and I'm out there doing it on my own, and I don't need anybody, and, by golly, rugged individualism, that was very familiar to me as a free market economist. A lot of my colleagues and friends, that's the way they think. So they have a problem with the sex of the body because having a baby is the one thing you cannot do by yourself. You have absolutely got to have the cooperation of another person of the opposite sex in order to have a baby. And so this upsets them. It just does. And so these are the people who are all, if people want to buy an egg or want to buy a sperm, well, why not? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with renting a womb? What's wrong with buying a baby when it gets right down to it? Come on, free market, freedom, So on both sides of what's ordinarily considered the political spectrum, we've got people who resent the gendered, sexed nature of the human body. Okay, and so what you saw with same-sex marriage, the drive to redefine marriage, if you really think about what that was, it was an attempt to say that marriage shall no longer be a gendered institution. Marriage will no longer have anything to do with bringing the two sexes together, all right? Because it's a degendered, they have degendered or desexed marriage, you could say. And you see now the difference between sex and gender, using the terms the way you're supposed to. It's a little bit awkward, okay? But the sex of the body was declared irrelevant to marriage. That's what you could understand the Supreme Court to be saying. Right, that you can marry anybody you want regardless of the sex of your body, regardless of the sex of their body. And so once you've got that in place, that's a very significant building block to creating a society where the sex of the body does not matter for law or society, where the sex of the body is removed as a legal category. That's where the radicals were going all along. You thought gay marriage was about being nice to your lesbian neighbor so that she could have a nice white picket fence lifestyle and everyone could be nice to her and her partner when they had to go to the hospital or something. That's how it was sold. But what it was really about was taking the gendered nature of the body apart and getting the sexual nature, the sexed nature of the body out of society. That's what the radicals were driving at. And now that's clear. See, and the fact that as soon as Obergefell happened, as the Supreme Court case that redefined marriage happened in 2015, very quickly after that, Jim, very quickly after that, the whole thing pivoted towards the transgenderism, right? That's what you're remembering, you know, that very quickly after that. So you got the Human Rights Campaign and all of these gay political lobbying organizations and public relations companies and legal groups and so on. All of that money that they had built up, all of that infrastructure that they had built up, all of the contacts, all of the relationships, all of that social capital was turned to transgenderism. All of those resources were turned and focused on transgenderism. That's where we are today.
Okay, so then where do we go next? I guess, you know, I look at what's on the horizon here with this H.R. 5, this so-called Equality Act. So we can see this policy is being pushed in this way that I think in a nutshell, what it's trying to say is that, look, a man is a woman if he says he is, and then must be given every single right that a woman has, including bathrooms, including sports. Hard to conceive of a more anti-science ideology, although this is the same government that has government-sanctioned murder of innocent children in the womb and acts like these are not human beings. And you're a bigot if you don't support this so-called Equality Act. So what is your view on where this is all going? And then you know, I guess ultimately, what are we called to do to push back on that? Which is obviously a big question. There are many ways to look at it politically, but also really just even in our own families. How do we protect our children? I guess, you know, I'm sure you have many great thoughts on this. So please, by all means.
Well, okay, so where it's going, you know, just to be clear, where it's going, Jim, and I know it sounds crazy, but trust me when I tell you, they are going for a society where the sex of the body is not a legally recognized category, where because they resent the sex of the body. And if I could just say to your very Catholic audience out here, this is nominalism on steroids. Those of you who remember that old philosophical idea that things don't have any reality to them. The only reality is what we call things. That the names of things, that's more real than the real itself. Okay, and so a man who calls himself a woman is a woman, and nobody can argue with him. Okay, so this is nominalism. It is also Gnosticism, which in some way declares the body to be evil and something that we need to transcend. That in order to be happy, in order to be fulfilled, we must transcend the physicality of our bodies. This is where this is going. This is one of the oldest and most resilient and most vicious Christian heresies. Okay, Gnosticism. And this is its modern guise. Okay, St. Thomas had to fight it. It was called one thing. St. Augustine had to fight it. It was called a different thing. But it's the same thing. Okay, so that's what you need to understand. That's where they're headed. They are not making it up. They're dead serious. Yeah, they're crazy, but that doesn't matter. You know, they have a lot of power. They have a lot of power, and they can get a lot of things done. So the next step on the train is transhumanism, full-on transhumanism. And so deconstructing the body, the sex of the body, is one step towards being able to have the human biological thing connect to technology to make a more permanent, more superior being, which is part technology and part biology. There are people who want that, and those people have a lot of money, and that's what we're talking about.
Right, and if this keeps going, I mean, obviously they do this in stages, where they slowly people accept a little bit more. Do you see? I mean, is there any point? I mean, I would think that it's so outlandish. what we're seeing, this image of women's sports being destroyed with men entering in saying they're women. I would think that is so outlandish that people wouldn't possibly accept it. But I mean, here we are, and it seems like there's a whole lot of people that do accept it. Is there any point that you see that people are going to say that's enough, and actually it would drive them not just to say stop here, but it would make them relook at the actual philosophical underpinnings of the reality of all of this?
That's right. Well, the point where people say enough, that point is someplace different for everybody, obviously. But there are quite a few people who are saying enough. This is crazy. It's very interesting on the trans issue, Jim. There are a lot of radical feminists who have said enough. There are a lot of lesbians who have said enough. And what they're saying, and the reason is that these are women who accept the sex binary. They accept that there's a male body and a female body, and that this matters, right? And their position up until now had always been, we need to be resisting these people with male bodies because they're a problem to us, and we want to do certain things in certain ways to deal with what we perceive as a problem from those humans over there with male bodies, right? But now that the ideology has been grasped and steered in a very different direction from where they wanted to go, right? And so they're in alliance. We, the Ruth Institute and our friends, we are in alliance with any number of these people. We have at our website at ruthinstitute.org, we have what we call the Transgender Resource Center, which you can easily get to from our homepage. It's right on the homepage. You click through, and there's all sorts of resources, that explain different things about transgenderism. Well, one of the resources on there is from a radical lesbian group. It's their guide for journalists as to how to speak about these issues correctly. And it's really quite good, So I put it there so that, our church ladies or whoever could go look at it and go, okay, this is how we should be using the terminology. Here's how we don't give away the game by using their terminology, see, because they're very crafty with the terminology. As soon as you start using their words, you've given away the game. You know that from your pro-life work, you don't want to use their terminology. So there are some very interesting alliances happening. Will we be successful? Will we push things back to some kind of sanity? It's impossible to say. But what I think every person needs to say is enough. Anybody listening to this program, anybody with enough devotion to the Catholic faith that they would watch this program, by golly, you need to get up and do something, because this will not just collapse just because it's crazy. It can go on and on for a long time and do a lot of harm.
Right. So one of the things that we need to do is get thoroughly educated on this. And again, this can seem like something that is very simple. It is in a certain sense, but there's a whole lot surrounding this. There's a great depth to understand about this, just about language alone. And so I do want to encourage people, certainly keep listening here today. We're getting into it, but then also go to ruthinstitute.org and check out that Transgender Resource Center. It is stocked with great information that is going to be very, very helpful in learning more about this. But we'll be right back after the break. More with Dr. Morse. Stay tuned.
The Catholic Current, bringing Christ to the world and the world to Christ.
I have no clue what my future looks like. I know who my future is, and it lies in the hands of Christ. I'm not worried about where I'm going to live, what I'm going to do. My life, I want it to be His, and there's such a freedom in that. I never, ever thought that I would find freedom in a laid-down, surrendered life to Christ.
The Catholic Current, 5 p.m. Eastern, from the Station of the Cross and on the iCatholic Radio mobile app.
Hello, this is Father Frank Pavone of Priests for Life. In Romans we read, if the spirit of the one who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, the one who raised Christ from the dead will give life to your mortal bodies also. The Spirit of Christ is the Spirit of life, and to accept the call to follow Christ is to accept the call to welcome, nourish, defend, and celebrate life. This is Father Frank Pavone, National Director of Priests for Life.
Podcasts of our network-produced shows are free for your listening pleasure at thestationofthecross.com and on our free iCatholic Radio app for Android and Apple mobile devices. Be uplifted in your faith and inspired to spread the good news of Jesus Christ. Listen today at thestationofthecross.com or on our iCatholic Radio mobile app.
There's no better way to start your day than with spiritual formation from inspiring priests.
St. Thomas says, and it's our own personal experience of this, he says that the soul can only engage predominantly in one activity at a time, can do those things. He's talking about here on the psychological level.
That's Sermons for Everyday Living, weekdays from 6 to 7 a.m. Eastern on the Station of the Cross.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here. Our guest today, Dr. Jennifer Roback Morse, president of the Ruth Institute and author of The Sexual State, How Elite Ideologies Are Destroying Lives. We're talking today about part 4 in that book, The Gender Ideology. You can learn more, go to ruthinstitute.org. And when we talk about this tagline on your book, How Elite Ideologies Are Destroying Lives, and in particular, we're talking quite a bit about transgenderism today. Can you share with us some real life stories, any real life stories that sort of make this concrete, help us to understand the real damage that is truly taking place in lives?
Oh, golly. Yeah, sure. First of all, the subtitle is not just How Elite Ideologies Are Destroying Lives. There's also another little part, and why the church was right all along.
That's right, yeah.
So the book, the cover of the book is very clever, which I would never have thought of, but it's got an image of a church here, and then over here an image of the White House kind of a thing, the state versus religion and so on. So anyway, the church has been right all along about this stuff, and if you cling to the faith, you won't go too far wrong, although goodness knows there are a lot of pitfalls out there. But real life stories, Jim, I interviewed somebody for my program. I have a video podcast called The Dr. J Show. It comes out every Friday. People should really go listen to the one that's coming out tomorrow. I interviewed a woman who has lived as a lesbian. She's 57 years old. She's lived as a lesbian for many years, and she lived as a trans person for many years. So she took hormones, had her breasts amputated, had a hysterectomy, and is now desisted, what they call desisted or detransitioned. She's come back, and she's now living and presenting as a woman, and she's no longer on the hormones and so on and so forth. Her story is, in so many respects, heartbreaking, but I will just tell you one little heartbreaking aspect of it. First of all, it's always heartbreaking why people decide they're in the wrong body. Often there is sexual abuse involved. Often there is some kind of trauma involved, okay? And when the establishment, the medical establishment says, oh, your problem will be solved if you change the sex of your body, they ignore all of these underlying phenomenon that gave rise to the feeling of gender dysphoria in the first place, okay? So that's number one, big problem right there, that kids who have been traumatized in some way are never getting treated for their trauma. But this particular lady, in her 50s, she was presenting as a man. I forget the male name that she had for herself, and she became involved with the man who was presenting himself as a woman. So it was her first time really being in a relationship with a person of the opposite sex, but they were both presenting as the opposite sex, so it's a little bit confusing. But in one way, it was a little more normal because it actually was a man and a woman. A confused man and a confused woman, but yeah. Anyway, her friend was in a very serious accident and was in the intensive care unit, and she went to be with that person and try to be helpful and so on and so forth, and she really cares for this person very much. And in the experience of being with him in the ICU, and now she's got a beard, she's presenting as a man, has a beard, and he's looking like a woman and the whole thing. she felt this overwhelming desire to take care of him. And she goes, oh my golly, this is what it would be like to be a mother. And she had never had that feeling before of the joy that you could feel from being a mother and caring for someone else, from nurturing someone else, from wanting to pour yourself out for another person. She had never had that feeling. Okay, so that, to me, that's a huge loss, right? That the loss of a normal sense of what it means to be a woman had been denied to her for 50 years or something. That she had to be that old. Mm-hmm. Among the other ways that people's lives are ruined, there's a term that we sometimes use called trans widows. In other words, when your husband decides he's really a woman and decides to leave you and your children to go, live his cross-dressing, cross-sex lifestyle, everybody expects you and the children to go along with it. And you get left behind. Okay, the wife, the children get left behind. And so there's a term called trans widow. And I've interviewed somebody in that situation too. She was actually told by a therapist that she needed to really become a lesbian so that she could be with her husband in her husband's new condition. Because her husband was really actually a woman now, and that was the right way for her to relate to her husband. This kind of thing, this is what people encounter when they're trying to deal with this, right? So there's all of that kind of stuff. And then plus there are the people who figure out that it was a big mistake to try to change the sex of the body. Here's a kind of story that you hear often, Jim, that people will say, I had all this discomfort, I had been abused, and I thought, I heard about transitioning, and I said, that's going to be the solution to my problem, I'm going to do that. And so they do one step and think, oh, okay, I'll take another step and then I'll really feel better. And then I'll take another step and then I'll really feel better. I'll start with the hormones and changing my name, and then I'll get one kind of surgery, and then I'll get another kind of surgery. And finally they realize that none of those steps are really going to help, mm-hmm. And then they have to walk it all back, and they can't completely walk it all back. And this is the fraud that the medical establishment is perpetuating on people is shocking. And there will be lawsuits. There will be very expensive lawsuits. Trust me on that, because the damage, the physical damage, and the lack of informed consent is just unbelievable. But in order for that to happen, people like you and me need to stay engaged with it. We cannot turn our backs on it and say, well, we'll just let this thing take its course, run its course. Sooner or later, it'll all be solved. No, mm-hmm. You can't count on that.
Right, and what's really happening in the nature of this is that people are being affirmed in what is a mental disorder, right? This was included in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. So it was gender identity disorder became gender dysphoria in the last 10 years or so. And then even actually homosexuality, which again in your book why the church was right all along, right? The church still speaks of homosexuality as disordered in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Now there are people that are with the gender ideology that are trying to get that word out of there because they see how important that is to have that in there. But even homosexuality was removed as a disorder in the DSM in the 70s and 80s. Up until that point, it was being defined as such. And these are being changed not by scientific changes, but really by an ideological push that is saying, we want you to change this now, and these changes are taking place. So how do we, I guess we just stand in the truth, we can stand up to it, but as you know, we will be persecuted in doing so. So any encouragement for folks for standing in the truth on this stuff,
right.
That's what's truly loving, but we are going to take some heat. Right. There will be a cost for it.
That's right. I want to go back to something that you said, though, and just offer a little bit of clarification. When the Catholic Church says that homosexual acts are intrinsically disordered, when they're saying that, they're not using the term disorder in the same way that a psychologist would use the term disorder, because the Catholic Church is using it in an Aristotelian sense, in a philosophical sense, that it is not ordered toward that this is a sexual act that is not ordered towards its proper end. right? And because we believe that everything is something and that there's a reality to things, that a sexual act has a proper end. And being sexual with a person of your same sex is not ordered towards the proper end, which is intimacy with another human being of the opposite sex and openness to life, as you know. In a sense, you could say masturbation is disordered, right? Is intrinsically disordered because you're not supposed to be having sex with yourself. Okay, come on. You're not supposed to be having sex with yourself, people, So it's a little bit different than the way that the psychologists use the term. The psychology, because the church is not saying all homosexuals are nut jobs or anything like that. They're not saying that kind of thing. They're saying a different kind of thing. So just to clarify that. But anyway, what else did you want to know from me? You wanted to know about, encouragement for people to stay in the game?
That's right. Yeah, stand in truth even when there's a cost.
Yeah. Look, if this is your daughter, you want to talk about people whose lives have been ruined, Jim? People whose lives have been ruined. The parents of kids who have been swept away with this craze. There's now something called rapid onset gender dysphoria, and that refers to the situation where you have generally a teenage girl who never showed any signs of gender dysphoria before, who has, through some kind of social pressure, social contagion. All my friends are doing it. I've been on the internet for a long time, internet chat room. This is what everybody's talking about. All of a sudden, bingo, I'm trans. Out of the blue, a girly girl shows up and says, I'm trans. I'm really a trans person. The parents of those kids are in agony. They are in agony because they cannot stop it. Those kids get hooked up with the school system or the healthcare system, and they can be swept away with the whole and put on the conveyor belt of gender affirming care. You want to talk about a diabolical mislabeling of things. They're swept up in these attempts to alter the body to make it look like you are the opposite sex, and the parents are often powerless to do anything to stop it. The parents are accused of child abuse. The parents are told, oh, would you rather have a dead daughter or a live son? Which is just grotesque emotional manipulation. Your child will kill himself. He will kill himself if you don't let him become his true self, which is male. That's the pressure that parents are under. And so what I would say to all of your listeners, would you want to be in that position? Would you want to be that isolated and under that kind of pressure? If you know anybody who is dealing with this, please reach out to them. Please reach out to them in friendship and compassion to the extent that you possibly can. And, I understand you're going to feel like you're in Alice in the Wonderland, and down the rabbit hole with everything, nothing making sense and words not meaning what they're supposed to mean and all that. I understand it's not going to be fun. But what you friends and grandmas and aunties and neighbors and church ladies, what you do in this environment can really, really make a difference. You can be a lifesaver for somebody, So I would put that into you, and you don't have to be a psychiatrist. In fact, it's probably better if you're not, a psychiatrist. You don't have to be super, super overeducated to be grounded in reality, and to be able to be there and be a rock and a faithful friend. Because these parents, Jim, I'm telling you, they feel so isolated. Do you remember at our summit last summer? You came to our summit for survivors of the sexual revolution in Lake Charles last summer. We're going to be doing it again this summer. But there were some people there in these situations. One of the ladies on the panel was a trans widow. One of the ladies on the panel, her daughter had gone off the deep end, and her it's really, really hard for these people. So
right, and I think that's hearing the story from a person, hearing what's happened in their real life, that is so helpful. And I think that's why you've done such a good job at helping them to present their stories, because we need to hear them. I mean, the other side knows this well. They find people to pull on the heartstrings and really manipulate people and then get those stories out there. But to have real life stories of people that have really been hurt by this ideology, very, very important to hear. So this has been rampant in public schools. Real quick before the break here, has this also been creeping into private schools, even Catholic schools?
Oh, gosh, yes. Oh, you better look out for your Catholic schools. Don't assume that your kids are fine because they're at a Catholic school. You better pay darn good close attention to what's going on in the Catholic school. One of the ladies I interviewed, it was a Catholic school that sent her off to a gender camp, and the kid came back never the same.
All right, we're going to be right back on The Simple Truth more with Dr. Jennifer Roback Morse and her book, The Sexual State, How Elite Ideologies Are Destroying Lives and Why the Church Was Right All Along. Stay tuned.
Station of the Cross, we proudly bring the truths of the Catholic faith to countless listeners through radio and mobile devices, and we're grateful for the feedback we've received.
Catholic radio has just been a lifesaver for me. I start my day with it. I listen to it all day long as much as I can. There's always people calling in with people who've lost children, and I love what everyone has to say and the advice of the Catholic Church and how to deal with suffering. It has given me the strength to get through the day and to get out of bed each morning. I am very grateful for it.
Catholic radio to me has been very informative on my religion. It has informed me of many things that I wasn't aware of or should have been aware of, and I've enjoyed it very much listening to it.
If you've been blessed by listening to the Station of the Cross, let us know. Call 1-877-888-6279, extension 112. Then share your testimonial with us.
The iCatholic Radio mobile app is 2 apps in 1. Your place to hear great Catholic programs and music. Here's what listeners are saying about the updated iCatholic Radio mobile app.
Through the iCatholic Radio app, I have listened to the sermons and teachings several times. The effect has been a deeper understanding of my faith and Catholic tradition. This app has truly been a blessing in my life and has increased my faith.
With the new app, you can choose to listen to our programs like Mother Miriam Live or The Catholic Current whenever you like. But you can also switch over to the best in contemporary music by Catholic artists. We even bring you hours of Gregorian chant every Sunday morning. If you do not currently have our app, download it to your iPhone through the Apple Store or to your Android phone by going to Google Play and searching iCatholic Radio. The updated iCatholic Radio mobile app, your one stop for great Catholic programs and music.
Back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here. Our guest today, Dr. Jennifer Roback Morse, president of the Ruth Institute. I encourage you to go learn more about the Ruth Institute and their great work, ruthinstitute.org. They've also recently launched a transgender resource center, which is going to be very, very helpful in continuing to build your understanding of what's going on in this important area. Also included in this area is a new pamphlet that they have out that is useful outside of abortion centers, particularly outside of Planned Parenthoods. Just when you thought Planned Parenthood couldn't get any worse, although I don't know if anyone ever thinks that, but they continue to get worse and worse and worse. Here's Planned Parenthood, an anonymous employee from Planned Parenthood recently calling trans kids cash cows for Planned Parenthood, kind of blowing the whistle on what's going on there, saying that they told the Wall Street Journal that youth who identify as transgender were quickly being prescribed cross-sex hormones with no examination of their underlying condition, and that many of those seeking such treatment showed signs of emotional and mental health issues, and then are kept on the hook for this foreseeable future in terms of follow-up appointments, blood work, meetings, etc. Again, that sense of of being a sort of cash cow for Planned Parenthood. So they found a new income stream here in this transgenderism. And so to have a pamphlet put together here by the Ruth Institute in conjunction with the American College of Pediatricians and Dr. Michelle Cretella, which I also highly recommend the work that is put out over there, acpeds.org. This pamphlet is very, very helpful on the sidewalks outside of Planned Parenthood. When you do encounter somebody in this situation, it's great to have a resource to give them, but this might also be a great resource to have to share with anybody who might be struggling with this confusion. And you can find that by going to ruthinstitute.org. You can also go to transregret.com specifically to find more information out there, transregret.com. So, Dr. Morse, what else would you like to share with people today before we close the program?
Well, I'm really glad you mentioned that pamphlet, and I want to give full credit. I want the listeners to know. I want your listeners to know that you deserve a lot of credit for that pamphlet. Okay, everybody. So Jim was just now reading to you from a report that came out very recently about, Planned Parenthood workers coming clean and saying what was going on. But Jim told us last summer when he was visiting with us in Lake Charles, he told us, we do sidewalk counseling, and the sidewalk counselors are telling us that they're seeing all these trans-minded patients. That's what I'm calling them, because we call them abortion-minded patients, right? These trans-minded clients coming in, and our sidewalk counselors are trained to deal with abortion, but they're not trained to deal with the trans issue. We don't know what to say. We don't know what to do. And so Dr. Cretella and I thought, well, criminy, we can help with that, So we pulled ourselves together to try to create that pamphlet, and it just came out right around the time that this report hit to the Wall Street Journal. So I'm grateful to you, Jim, and all of your coworkers, all of your colleagues there in the sidewalk counseling aspect of the pro-life movement. That's what we designed it for, was for that encounter. So it's very simple. It doesn't overwhelm the young person with a lot of stuff. It's very, has attractive photos and things like that on it, and is colorful, and, all the kind of things that because you're thinking it's a 14-year-old maybe. Okay, people understand. We're talking about 14, 15-year-olds going without their parents' consent to a Planned Parenthood clinic and walking out with a prescription for testosterone. Okay, that's what we're talking about here. This is really quite gross. Okay, but yes, you can get that pamphlet at ruthinstitute.org. You can follow the trail and get there, or you can just go directly to transregret.com and you can find that pamphlet there, and you can download it, make as many copies as you want or need. We're also, Jim, going to be offering some training on how to use it, some training that is focused on pro-life people who are used to being out there talking to people but don't know what to say about this particular issue. I think that's going to be part of our Summit for Survivors of the Sexual Revolution this summer. We'll be having special sessions on that so that pro-lifers can know what to do when they encounter this kind of person. But this whole pattern, you see, all the things that have been put into place by Planned Parenthood and by the sexual revolutionaries, now all that stuff is being turned towards the purpose of transgenderism. See, so the stuff in the schools that the parents don't know about, the fact that your child can get an abortion without you knowing about it, the fact that Medicaid will pay for these things without you knowing about it, all of that has been in place already. And now the Planned Parenthood people are telling your daughter or your granddaughter how to get on a bus, how to get to the clinic without anyone knowing, so she can get cross-sex hormones and be put on the path towards transition. All of that's already in place has been turned towards the promotion of transgenderism.
All right. Well, as it often is when we get into these topics where the lies are so thick in the culture, it can be quite overwhelming once we take a good look at it. Anything in terms of encouragement to leave us with today, to offer some hope? What can we focus on to really stay active and effectively fighting the good fight here?
Well, I think you need to take the long view. You're going to have days where you're going to have unpleasant encounters, and you're going to be making sacrifices. But, eternity is long, right? Life is short. Eternity is long. You're going to be dead a long time, people. I don't know how to explain this, but, you're going to be dead a long time. And someday people are going to look back on this period of time and they're going to say, what the heck were those people thinking? How could they possibly have believed what they said they believed? How could they have done these things? And when that happens, they're also going to say it was the people of faith who had the courage to say that this was wrong and who had the gumption to stand up and recognize a problem and deal with it, and it was only the people of faith, pretty much only the people of faith. And so you want to be on that winning side, you really do. And our Lord knows, our Lord saw all of this in the agony of the garden. He saw every sin of mankind. He saw this was going to happen. He saw those little girls in the waiting room waiting for their testosterone shots, thinking that this was going to make them feel better. He saw, he saw everything that led up to that, everything that's going to flow from it. And maybe he saw you as a person who was going to intervene at the right moment and do something that would help. So you got to look at it from our Lord's perspective and just don't be troubled. Yeah, you all in the pro-life movement, you've been doing that for years, right? You know that, right? Am I right, Jim?
Just keep doing the good that is in front of you, and we can't control the outcome, but we can control the good that is before us. So let's keep going. Right. So the Dr. J Show every Friday. Tell us how we can find it.
So here's what you need to do. When you go to ruthinstitute.org, there's a little drop-down menu where you can get involved. And first thing you need to do is subscribe to our newsletter, so you'll hear from us every week. And then you need to go over to our YouTube channel, which you could search directly at YouTube, Ruth Institute on YouTube, and subscribe to that YouTube channel. Well, we upload an episode of the Dr. J Show every Friday at noon Pacific time, and we upload another shorter program every Tuesday. So there's tons of content coming out there, and often we're interviewing survivors, people who have been through the mill in one way or the other. Often we're interviewing subject matter experts who know what they're talking about and who can equip you with the knowledge that you need, and a lot of times we're interviewing activists who are out there, just grabbing it by the grabbing that bull by the horns and not letting go. And, sometimes I love those people the most, they're not always, they're not always polished, right? But the heart is all there, so go sign up and subscribe to the Dr. J Show, the Ruth Institute YouTube channel. You won't regret it.
Absolutely. Dr. Morse, thank you so much for being with us today and for all your great work.
Well, Jim, it's a pleasure, and I'm really glad I had the opportunity to get to know you last year at the Summit for Survivors of the Sexual Revolution, and I hope I'll see you and your friends this year, too.
Awesome. Yes, absolutely. All right, ruthinstitute.org. Also, get the book, The Sexual State, How Elite Ideologies Are Destroying Lives and Why the Church Was Right All Along. All right, tomorrow is Fridays with Father. Father Stephen Imbarrato will be with us again as usual, and it's going to be a great one with him, so come on back tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern on The Simple Truth. God bless you.
This is Rick